Welcome. It's a nice Tuesday here in lovely Idaho, and do my weekly Patreon uh, podcast. And what I was thinking about doing was the cosmological argument for God's existence, and I thought about doing it because I wanted to present something that, well, sometimes I just like doing things with logic and statements. And what I want to present is an argument. I've used various forms of this argument in debates with atheists and various times on the radio. And you may or may not have heard of it, the cosmological argument. I'm going to go through it a little by little, and it's work. It's valuable. I used this against Eddie Tabash here at Boise State University about 5 years ago or so. We had a debate, and even the atheist said that I won that one. He was not able to refute the issue. And I'm going to present the same basic thing that I did with him and kind of expand on some things. It really is a powerful argument. Now, ultimately, this argument um, doesn't really prove the Christian God. But of course, I would be saying in an argument that I'm only defending the Christian God. And this is one of the preliminary ways, or one of the ways of demonstrating logically that he exists or necessarily must exist. And then only argue from the presupposition of Christian theology. But nevertheless, I wanted to present this at you, to you, and you can tell me what you think of it. You can leave comments later. But this is pretty powerful. It's pretty good. And I'm going to go through one thing at a time. All right, now, so the cosmological argument basically has to do with the universe exists and what brought it into existence, and what brought it into existence had to have a cause, and you can't go back in an infinite regression of causes, and therefore you can only have a single uncaused cause, and therefore that causes God. But that's a super short version. Let me work with this. So we know that the universe exists. Okay, that's a given. And we also know that the universe is not infinitely old. And there's various reasons we can say that. One is the law, second law of thermodynamics, in that things are running down. And if the universe were infinitely old, it would have run down by now. Just philosophically, physically true fact. It just would have run down if it was infinitely old. So that can't happen. Also, and the reason we know that can happen is because the universe is not run down. Hence, it's not infinitely old. It had a beginning. Another way of demonstrating this is dealing with actual and potential infinites. An actual infinite is you have a point in time and you go back infinitely, forward infinitely, and you can never find the end either way. A potential infinite, for example, is starting right now, and you add 1 second. You add another second. It's 2 seconds. Now you have 3 seconds and 4, and it goes. As long as it goes on, it has a potential to be infinite. But whenever you stop and measure a potential infinite, it's always a finite number. But an actual infinite you can't measure. So, for example, if I have points like this between my fingertips, there's a line. How many points are between those two, along this line between my fingertips? Well, it's an infinite number of points. Now, here's something that's interesting: is 3 dimensions is height, width, and depth. 2 dimensions is height and width, or just width and depth. And a piece of paper like this is 2-dimensional. 1 dimension is just a line. A 0 dimension is a point, has no dimensionality, it's just a location. So how many points are there? An infinite number. Well, the thing is, if you take half of this line, take half of that line, how many points are on half a line? An infinite number. Well, how do you have half of an infinite be equal to the whole of the infinite? It doesn't make any sense. And so a lot of people, the philosophers, say the actual infinites don't exist. And so therefore the universe cannot be actually infinitely old. Because for one thing, if it was actually infinitely old, there'd be an infinite number of occurrences, like seconds. But the problem is you can't traverse an actual infinite, because if you traverse it from the beginning, but there is no beginning to get to now, well, you can't do that. You can't traverse it because you can't traverse an infinite amount of space or time. Another reason an actual infinite doesn't work is because if you don't have a first cause, you can't have a second, and you can't have a third, and you can't have a fourth. If it's an actual infinite, you don't have a first cause. Well, how can you have a second, third, fourth, etc. to get to now? And these are real brief issues, but briefly described issues, but the universe is not infinitely old. All right, so we know that the universe had a beginning. Now we have to ask the question, what caused the universe to exist? The universe was either caused to exist by something else, or it caused itself to exist. Now, if it caused itself to exist, it had to have the ability to perform actions. But in order to perform actions, to have a self-cause, you have to exist. So it wouldn't make sense to say the universe caused itself to exist, because if it's nothing, there's nothing there. There's nothing there to do anything, because nothing is nothing. Nothing is what rocks think of. Blank. There's nothing. No properties, nothing. It doesn't make sense to say that the universe caused itself to exist. So something caused the universe to exist. Now, there's only two options that we can work with. The cause of the universe was either personal or it was not personal. That's it. A personal cause, or was not the case that it was a personal cause. You can't go, there's no halfway between. It's either the case that it was a personal cause, or it's not the case that it was a personal cause of the universe. This is a true dichotomy. Now, if we only have two options, a personal cause and not a personal cause, and you negate either one, then the other one's automatically validated. Whichever one you negate, the other one's validated, because it's the impossibility of the contrary. So if we only have two possible causes for something, the thing and not the thing, and one's negated, then the other is validated, because you can't negate the two options. So, because there aren't any more options left. And since the universe exists and it was caused to exist, it was caused to exist by a personal cause, or it was not caused to exist by a personal cause. Or we should say it better, the thing that caused the universe was personal, or the thing that caused the universe to exist was not personal. So it's either a personal cause of the universe, or it's an impersonal cause. Either way, the universe was caused. So that cause is either personal or it's not personal. All right. Let's work with a non-personal cause, because I can show you that that can't work. The non-personal cause. So in order for a non-personal cause to cause the universe, I mean, it has to not be alive, non-personal, not aware, not alive. In order for that to be the case, then the pre-existent thing of the universe caused the universe to exist. Now, someone could say, well, what caused that pre-existent thing? Well, what caused that one? Then that one, then that one. And then we go back an infinite regression of causes, and we have the infinite, the actual infinite problem of an infinite regression of things. You can't go back infinitely. So we can't say that the cause was caused infinitely. It doesn't work. Philosophically, logically, it just doesn't work. So we would say that the cause of the universe was there. Now, if we say that it was three causes back, the initial cause, whatever, well, then what caused that? And we're just, you either ask the question of that or of the one immediate to the universe. It's irrelevant how many causes might be in between, because you can't have an infinite regression of uncaused causes. There has to be an initial cause someplace. What's that initial cause that led to the existence of the universe? That causes personal or it's not personal. In the case of the non-personal option, if it's a non-personal option, then it has to have what's called a necessary and sufficient conditions in order to cause the universe to exist. Necessary and sufficient. So let me give you an illustration of that. This is my cell phone, all right? It's a few years old. It's a nice cell phone. And I'm holding it in my hand, all right? You can see, or hands, now it's hand. I'm holding it in my hand. Now, my arm, in order for this to, I'm going to raise it up. In order for me to be able to raise this phone up in the air, there has to be the necessary sufficient conditions. The necessary condition would be, in this case, my hand holding it. And the sufficient condition would be me having the strength and the will to lift. So the necessary and sufficient conditions. Now, we're talking about a human being here, but in the necessary and sufficient conditions, we have to have what's necessary. The phone has to exist. My hand has to grip it. The arm has to be here. Sufficient conditions is there has to be enough strength in order for it to lift and cause movement. So let me break this down a little bit. Let's just say, use my phone here again. Let's just say that there's a surface. And on this surface is a rock right here, okay? I'm gonna make this a rock. And this rock, we have a fulcrum, we have a lever, and we're gonna pull down this lever and it moves the rock. Well, what happens, let's do a better rock, okay? My thumb drive is now a rock. And so in order to move the rock, we have to have the necessary conditions. We have to have this surface, gravity. We have to have the object to be moved. We have to have a lever that comes down into it, right? And we have to have a fulcrum, because you know what a lever is. And there has to be a force that comes down. These are all the necessary elements of force, a lever, a fulcrum, to pry against, and then a force, and then this object moves and on this flat surface. So what we have here are the necessary conditions. The necessary conditions are the force, the lever, the fulcrum, the object. The sufficient conditions is basically the force has to be strong enough, the fulcrum has to be strong enough, the bar, the lever has to be strong enough. This has to not break so it can move. So we have necessary elements, but each of them has to be sufficient to accomplish the job. So let's just look at this issue of sufficiency of the force. We have a lever coming down, right? See if I can get here we go. So we have this lever, right? A lever that's gonna, on the fulcrum, it's gonna bend, it's gonna move this object. Well, this lever's right here. Now, if the lever's right there, a force has to come down. Let's just say hypothetically that in our imaginary situation, that the amount of force necessary to push, to cause the movement, the net amount of force to overcome gravity and friction and various things, that necessary amount of force has to be 25 pounds. If you put a 25-pound weight on the end of the, suspended it via chain, whatever, then automatically it goes. If you put a 24-pound weight, it doesn't do anything. A 24.5-pound weight doesn't do anything. 24.75 doesn't do anything. But when you get to exactly 25, it moves. So the necessary and sufficient conditions, the necessary things are all these objects, and the sufficient condition in this case we're going to focus on is the force. As soon as, now this is an important concept, as soon as the necessary and sufficient conditions are there, then the result is automatic. If there's a non-personal force, then whatever caused the universe to exist had to possess the necessary and sufficient conditions. It had to have this necessary stuff, whatever it was, to create the universe, but it also had to have the sufficient conditions, otherwise the universe wouldn't have been created. But if it's impersonal, that which is necessary and sufficient would be automatic, or it would not be the case that it's automatic. If it had both necessary and sufficient conditions, it would be an automatic result. In other words, the only way a non-personal pre-existing thing could bring the universe into existence, move the rock. The only way it could happen if it was non-personal is if everything was there all the time. Because if things changed within it, then we have to know what was causing the change within it, and it was an internal or an external change. And then we get into some other issues we won't get into right now, and there's problems there. Because you can't have an infinite amount of changes, and you can have this, and you have an infinite problem again, and all this stuff. So the thing is that the conditions that are represented by this lever with the imaginary weight there, whatever pre-existed had to automatically and naturally possess the necessary and sufficient conditions. But if it possessed the necessary and sufficient conditions, then it did so as part of its essence and part of its nature. And whatever existed before the universe existed eternally, let's just say, or was caused, and the thing that caused, we just come back and back and back. So we're going to focus on this one thing, the cause. So that cause had to possess it automatically or did not possess it automatically. In other words, it was part of it or it was not part of it. It either had the necessary and sufficient conditions or it did not have the necessary and sufficient conditions. If it did not have the necessary and sufficient conditions, it could not have created the universe. But if it did have the necessary and sufficient conditions, it would have created the universe automatically. Because as soon as it is there, that's what it is. It has to have it from the beginning. That's what it is. Has to have that ability to create the universe. Well, then it would have created the universe automatically. But here's the thing. Aside from looking at, as I've repeated, an infinite regression of causes, which can't be, we assume by purposes of illustration that this pre-existent thing is eternal, because it's impersonal, and it's an eternal thing. It doesn't work, but we have to assume we're playing, it's not mind games, it's ways of trying to do thought experiments, because you can't have an infinite regression. You had to have something that was had a beginning, but then where did it come from? From the impersonal view, all this doesn't work. That's why it just doesn't work. That's why we can negate it, but I'm going through this. So this would mean the pre-existing thing had to have the necessary and sufficient conditions from eternity. And if it had it from eternity, then it would have created the universe an infinite long time ago. But if it did that an infinitely long time ago, the universe would have run down by now. And since it's not run down by now, it's impossible that it was created an infinitely long time ago. Therefore, the impersonal cause cannot work. And since the impersonal cause cannot work, the only other option is a personal cause. Therefore, it's proven to be true by the impossibility of the contrary. The impossibility of the contrary. Let me give an illustration of what that means. Let's say there's a rich man and he loves coins, and he has a special vault built. And it's got dials, iris recognition, it's got thumbprint recognition, breath recognition, and voice pattern recognition. And it's only one door to get in the vault and one door to get out, and there's cameras everywhere. And he buys some coins in a bag, a leather bag, but he rare coins, and he wants to look at them and have fun with them. He wants to put them in the vault and go in there. It's a big vault, and have fun, but he can't. He's got a meeting to go to, a really important meeting. So what he does is he takes his newly bought coins in this leather bag, opens it up. Oh, that's great. It's going to be fun going to these later. And he goes inside the vault, and inside the vault is a single movable chair, and there's a desk, just a regular, like a card table kind of a desk, 4 legs, metal, welded to the floor. And there's an air vent about this big, just a few inches across, and it's got a grate, air coming in, air coming out, and it's got a single light bulb hanging down. All right. He puts the coins on the table, and then he goes out and locks everything up, and he takes off for a few hours, and he comes back after his meeting, and he opens everything up, takes a full 30 seconds, because there's so many locks. And lo and behold, he opens a door, and he goes in there, and he discovers that the coins are stacked outside of the bag in prime numbers. Like there's a stack of 3, and then there's a stack of 5 coins, and then there's a stack of 7, and then a stack of 11 and 13. And he sees this, and the bag is folded next to him, or next to the coins. Well, obviously, someone got in there, right? So he calls the police, calls the security company. No fingerprints, no DNA traces, no film, nothing. The camera shows absolutely nothing on the outside. Didn't have a camera on the inside. Now he's going to get one, but nothing. Everything is set. Everything is normal. Everything. The motion sensors that he's got. Everything. Nothing went off. Now, did the bag itself put these coins in order and fold itself, or did it not? The answer is it did not, because it doesn't have the properties or the ability to put things in prime number stacks, which is information. and movement, and a bag can't do that. So obviously there was an intelligence that it got involved. So we would say either an intelligence did it, or it's not the case that an intelligence did it. And the reason we know it's an intelligence because there's information. The coin number stacks in prime numbers, not prime number stacks. And so an intelligence did it, or it's not the case that it's intelligence did it. Well, we know that the chair didn't do it. We know the table didn't do it. There's a grid on the little air vents. Nothing got in. It's welded. Uh, and so all the options of the coins or the table, the chair, the walls, the light bulb did it. No. Obviously, an intelligence did it. You see, we could easily negate the idea of a non-intelligence arranging these things. And because we can say that's not even a possibility, we know the only other option is an intelligence did it. Now, people would like to play with this, and they'll say, well, it's either an apple did it or it's not the case that an apple did it, Matt. It doesn't make any sense. And so it's not the case of an apple, or an apple did it. Well, did an apple do it? No. Then it's not the case that it's an apple. I have different people trying to argue around this stuff. It doesn't work. Well, it was not the case that an apple. Something else besides an apple did it. Anyway, basic logic. So the idea in the cosmological argument here is this, that we have two options. The universe existed forever or did not exist forever. Well, it obviously did not exist forever. It was caused. The cause of the universe is either personal or it's not the case that it's personal. And what we can do is negate the idea of a personal cause. And therefore, by negating the idea of a personal cause, the only other option is left, a personal cause, hence God. Now, this makes sense. Let me work with this a little bit. If we have our surface and the fulcrum, and I were to walk in, or you were to walk in to this situation, the necessary and sufficient conditions are present, assuming you have the ability, and I have the ability, to put 25 pounds of pressure on the bar. All right. I work out with weights, but doing it for years, strong enough. You can do it. 25 pounds, nothing, right? We walk in. So now what we have is a little bit of a variable on this. We have necessary and sufficient conditions. However, there's a slight variation in that there's a personal involvement, decision making. So I look at this and I see it's all been set up to move the rock. And I know that I can take that bar and I know that I can pull it down whenever I choose to. And so I'm sitting there, or you're sitting there, you're thinking about it, and you're thinking about it, and you decide at a point in time, and you reach up to the bar and you pull and you move the rock. Now, the personal aspect of this means that the action occurred when it was decided to occur. Let's look at God as a necessary precondition. God's a personal being. He existed forever. He clicked the first domino in the series of dominoes. The first second of time began. He had that ability with the necessary and sufficient conditions and his personal decision. He decided to act and create the universe. He could exist forever, infinitely forever, and he is forever. Boy, talk about mind-blowing. And he could, and we don't know what time is in relationship to him or out or without him and outside of it. So we're talking areas we can't even get to. You know, what we could do hypothetically is think about this and say, well, God decided in his realm of eternity, as he relates to it, to pull the lever. Bang, universe came into existence. He could have existed from forever and then decided to pull the lever and the universe existed. This way, it makes sense from the personal God, does not make sense from the impersonal option. And so I've used this basic argument with atheists very successfully. And they don't know what to do with it. They can't refute it because it's a simple issue of logic. And it takes time to explain it. This is a bit longer, one of the longer proofs, so to speak. But it's a good one. And there's information on CARM on it, on the Cosmological Argument. I think I've expanded on it and got some arguments there. I did a video, or I was in a debate. I think it's out there someplace on the web where I've gone over this as well. But This is the basic argument that I use when I talk to atheists, and the cosmological argument, they don't to me much anymore. They used to call me all the time and challenge me, not so much. So there you go. And now I'm going to be working on something on tag. There's some issues with tag, the transcendental argument for God's existence. Maybe I'll go over that another time. But I wanted to just run this by you and see what you thought. You can give me some comments in the on Patreon, and thank you for your support. It really does help a lot. Really do need it. And praise God. So there you go. I just wanted to say thanks and give you that, and hope it was interesting, and leave comments if you want, and I can address them. If not, okay. Praise God, and talk to you later.